So, we're on the home stretch now, episode 8 of Star Trek Picard, season 3. The episode is entitled Surrender. Major spoilers ahead. Okay. First, I want to repeat myself a little bit here. Season 3, as you know, is one continuous mystery box story arc told across all 10 episodes. Now, I really like this paranoia conspiracy thriller they're telling this season. The changelings quietly infiltrating Starfleet ships, working in secret to take down the Federation in a big crescendo leading to the Frontier Day celebrations. It's exciting, and along the way, we've had some wonderful character moments. The issue, I think, is that this plot does not need to be told across 10 episodes. It would have been much tighter and more cohesive if it had have been told in 6 or 7 episodes, leaving 3 or 4 episodes free for standalone stories in the middle of the season. This would have given the season more variety. There could have been room for a classic Star Trek cerebral, moral, ethical dilemma episode, or a more light-hearted episode, a planet-based episode with some exploration and discovery of new alien life, etc. Anything could have been possible, and it would have offered a welcome break from the intensity of the main story, which could still be concluded in the final 2 episodes. The issue with stretching the main story across the entire season is that some weeks there's not much progression, and so the narrative can become a bit diffused and listless. The reason I'm saying this before I get into my review of this episode is because the last 2.5 episodes have basically been about slowing the narrative progression down and stalling, bridging a gap between episode 6 and episode 9, in my opinion. So having seen 9 and 10, I can say that 9 is where you get your answers, and 10 is the big finale. The big questions that are still remaining are, who is behind this CGI face that's controlling the changelings? What do they have planned for Frontier Day? And what is the mystery behind Jack Crusher? Of course, we could still ask the question, why did they steal Picard's body? We've been given a reason for that, but is it the real reason? None of these questions are answered in this 8th episode, unfortunately. Frustratingly, the suspense and anticipation is extended further. I believe the writers had Vadic and her crew take over the Titan in the previous episode as a means of giving our heroes another problem to resolve in order to pad out the story for another week. Now, there are some very good elements to this week's episode, and I would argue this one is better than episode 7, marginally so. Also, both episodes are probably best watched back to back. Anyway, let's begin. So the episode opens with Vadic in the captain's chair having taken control of the Titan. The bridge crew are being held hostage on the bridge, lined up under guard. Picard, Beverly, Jack, and Sydney are in sickbay. LaForge, Data, and Alondra are in the computer lab, or whatever room this is. Vadic shuts down their access to key systems, locking them out, while they try to regain control. Vadic's psycho-eccentricity is, for me, just a bit over the top at times. She doesn't really feel threatening, frightening, or menacing. She's kind of just annoying. She isn't funny or clever, just angry and deranged in a kind of cliched, generic villain kind of way. What makes her even more annoying is that you know this entire situation is nothing more than a contrived plot device to slow the story arc down. When I first watched this episode, every time it went back to a scene with her on the bridge, I was just thinking, oh, shut up, can we just get on with opening the red door already? Anyway, Jack begins to develop new abilities. He seems to be able to project his mind across the ship, a kind of advanced telepresence. This vision, this sight that he has, reminds me of Borg vision in Star Trek First Contact. Vadic is holding the bridge crew hostage until Jack Crusher agrees to go up to the bridge and allow himself to be taken aboard the Shrike. That's basically the entire basis of this week's conflict. Meantime, we cut away to the Shrike's holding cells where Riker and Troi are being held captive, and yes, this is the real Deanna Troi and not a changeling imposter. Their scenes together are probably the best of the episode, and Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes really shine here. Riker is being tortured on and off for information, but ultimately he's hugely relieved to see her again, saying that he missed loving her, and that if they kill him, he's glad he could give her the old Riker charm once again. She explains that the changeling who came to their home and posed as him was also pretty charming. As she says, he was good in bed, bad at pizza, and they laugh at this. And then she says that she knew they were changelings when they first arrived. So, did she really know she was sleeping with a changeling imposter of Riker at the time? And was she just playing along, under duress because she feared for her life or something? I don't think it was necessary for the character to have this line about knowing that they were changelings from the start, and it just makes things more complicated and a bit weird. This is what I would describe as overwriting, where extraneous dialogue is inserted in some scenes, and it just ends up making things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. Shaw and Seven quietly confer between each other on the bridge. Shaw says to her that she should have blown the turbo lift with him inside. This obviously would have killed Vadic, and him of course, but Seven draws the line at trading lives. They disagree about this. Jack wants to go up to the bridge to hand himself over after Vadic makes a threat to kill one member of the bridge crew for every 10 minutes he doesn't cooperate. Jack believes that they must want to take him to the Great Link on the Changeling homeworld. Picard says that she likely has something different in mind, something much more complicated. Jack says he's not a changeling, but he's always felt different. He's a talker and charismatic. He uses this persona as a means of distracting from what he's really feeling. He feels like something is different about him. He believes he can retake the ship by connecting to other people and taking over their bodies. Sydney confirms he can do this, because he did it to her obviously. So he reaches out to connect with one of the bridge officers to enter an override codex belonging to Picard on a display on the bridge, but Vadic spots it and stops him. She realizes that Jack is discovering his abilities. She executes Lieutenant Teveen. One thing I will also add is that unfortunately Captain Shaw is very weak in this episode. And it's not Todd Stashwick's fault, he's just not given much to do. The character made a very big impact in the first 5 episodes of this season, but lately it's like he's almost anonymous. He doesn't step up to Vadic on the bridge, he doesn't assert himself or try to sacrifice himself for the good of his crew. He doesn't try to bargain with Vadic or engage in any kind of hostage negotiation tactics, which one would assume that Starfleet captains would be somewhat trained in. He tells Seven that there's nothing they can do. It's really weak and disappointing. Unfortunately, he just comes across as being a bit cowardly. Back on the Shrike, Deanna and Riker talk about their grief over the death of their son. Apparently, there was a reason Riker didn't feel anything after the boy died, because Deanna went into his head and tried to dull the pain, but he needed to feel the grief. Human beings need to experience a period of grief and mourning in order to overcome loss and trauma. Surely any counselor or therapist worth their salt would know this. But apparently she forgot what all counselors should remember. You can't skip to the end of healing. Of course, she had her own challenges. Being empathic, she felt everyone else's grief also. I have to say, I really like the scenes between the two of them, because the chemistry between Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis has always been wonderful, even in the old TNG days. You can't help but enjoy their moments together. They also talk about leaving their old house and moving to the city. Anyway, they're rescued by Worf. How he tracked them down, I don't know. That's not explained. He has a very amusing poetic reintroduction to Deanna. Now, I have it on good authority that due to budgetary reasons, the La Sirena set had to be completely converted into the Shrike sets, which is why we don't see the La Sirena on the show anymore. You'll notice here that Raffi and Worf are using a cloaked Starfleet shuttle. Where did they get the cloaking device, you're wondering? Well, the story goes that the cloaking device that was taken from the Bounty and installed in the Titan has been temporarily placed into this Federation shuttlecraft. At any rate, back on the Titan, they need a superintelligence to help them break Vadic's control of the ship's computer, so they need Data. In order to get him operational again, however, they have to remove the partition between Data and Lore in order to get Data to take control of the android body they inhabit. So Data and Lore have some good scenes together here in Limbo, as Lore taunts Data about his personal memories, represented in the form of his belongings. It appears that Data is slowly being erased by Lore. On the Shrike, they find Picard's human body, and they proceed to download information on what the changelings actually wanted with it. Raffi explains they removed portions of his parietal lobe, sections that have been infected with Irumodic syndrome. Jack comes to the bridge carrying an unknown device the computer can't recognize. The crew are placed into the briefing room, all but 7 of 9. Vadic asks Jack what it's like to go from planet to planet but never to be able to shake that shadow inside himself, the feeling of isolation, loneliness. She asks if he's heard the voices. I think these hints should start to nudge the fan theories into a very specific direction at this point. So many voices, she says. Uh-huh. Now, without giving anything away, what conclusions would you draw from this, dear viewer? Meantime, Data overtakes Lore by giving him his belongings, including the hologram he had of Tasha Yar and his cat Spot. These are what made Data Data. Ultimately, they enable the two androids to reconcile, to merge into one new Data with the human emotions of Lore. Brent Spiner's acting helps to sell this, I think. So basically, a new Data is back, and he helps them retake the ship's systems. There's definitely a feel-good factor to the last quarter of this episode. Even Raffi gets in on the action when she returns to the Titan, fighting off the changelings. But it's in hand-to-hand combat. I mean, again, why aren't the changelings using their goo tentacles? They can literally turn themselves into unstoppable octopuses if they wanted to. For some reason, when she's fighting them, they're taking humanoid form still. Anyway, Jack enables a force field around himself and Seven, and Picard gives the computer the order to open the evacuation hatch, which opens the view screen. And unfortunately, this is where the one remaining final F-bomb happens. I warned you about this a few weeks ago. Vadic says, "effing solids." It's kind of funny, but it's not suitable for Star Trek. It belongs in a completely different franchise or film. This sequence is also really helped by a fantastic musical score. Vadic is completely frozen in space, and then she collides with the Shrike, smashing into pieces. Yes, I was also reminded of the shape-shifting T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day, when he gets frozen, smashed into pieces, and then begins to reform again. Changelings are able to survive in the vacuum of space, as established on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So maybe Vadic could have survived this, though it could be argued that she's a different type of changeling, so maybe she can't. Regardless, it's unlikely she survived what happens next. Shaw gives Seven the nod, and she orders the Shrike to be completely destroyed. It explodes. Were the Shrike's shields down or something? Maybe I missed that point. At any rate, it's gone now, and so is Vadic, I'd imagine. There's a nice nod to Star Trek The Motion Picture, with a wonderful beauty shot of the Titan and a throwback to the music from that film. Data is back now, and he's more human than ever. He can even feel old man pains in his synthetic humanoid body. He has a nice couple of scenes with Picard and Geordi. He says that the old Data is resting peacefully, but this new version is ready to live again as a very human iteration of Data. For the first time since Star Trek Nemesis, the entire Next Generation cast reunite around a conference room table. Deanna feels that there is an all-consuming darkness on the ship, and it's not just the poorly lit bridge. She believes that whatever the changelings have in store for Frontier Day, it's tied directly to Jack. So she goes to see him, and they do this hypnosis therapy or whatever, and she tries to help him open the red door in his mind to find out what's behind it. Unfortunately, the episode ends right there, which is a shame because it would have made a much bigger impact and made for a better cliffhanger if you'd actually seen what's behind it. And you're going to see what's behind it next week. I have to confess, though, I think reactions are going to range from, okay, to, is that it? I don't think there's going to be gasps of absolute shock and amazement. I mean, I'm sure there's fans already figuring out what's really going on here. Thankfully, the answers are coming in episode 9, like I say, and I'm glad to say that none of the fan theories have been accurate so far, though one or two have been kind of close. But no, this season doesn't recreate the story of Star Trek Armada. That was a great game, wasn't it? Also, as I've said before, there's been several lines of dialogue in episodes 4 and 5 that hint at something none of the fan theories have picked up on so far. Specifically, these lines of dialogue relate to how the central conflict works. I'm not going to mention what those lines of dialogue are because it might give too much away, but suffice to say, when you rewatch Season 3 after you've finished the season, you'll see all of these little hints, clues, and setups behind the Changeling conspiracy in prior episodes. Suffice to say, I really like the last 2 episodes of this season. I'll leave it at that. So let me know your thoughts on the 8th episode of Star Trek Picard Season 3 in the comments below. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.